Reality Redemption is back. MJ here, and we got
Snow in the house.
Snow's short for snowflake. Hey, you look all like rejuvenated. Where have you been lately?
I am rejuvenated. I went to my home away from home in Desert Hot Springs recently. I went for the New Year's holiday and had a great time basking in the amazing water. And I met some really cool new friends while I was there. And you know what? Like everyone that was at the hotel that weekend, that stay, like everyone was cool. It was just like an amazing positive vibe. But I met this one couple that were really cool, nice people too. They were they were awesome.
Right, it just so happens we have one of them on the phone right now.
We do
It's
because
amazing, miracle.
how does
what
that
we do.
happen? And then
Because
it's
this
like
podcast is magic.
right? And we were so I mean, I talked to them like all the days that I was down at the pool and they were down at the pool. And it's like we got into conversations and talking about like, the good things to about during these awful times about like music. And just so happens our guest that's coming on, his name is Justin, and he has more of a background to educate us in that field,
Well,
in the music field.
I just love music and have for years, and just my passion is music. Going
Yeah,
to
you're
concerts.
usually always at a concert.
I haven't been to a concert in a year now. It was a year yesterday.
You've got it like marked on your calendar.
It came up with my memories. Well, that's because it was David Lee Roth, and
okay.
he started residency in Vegas, and I filmed that night. I put it up on YouTube, and I got it went viral. Music news pages were talking about and posting my videos. Sammy Hagar was talking about watching the videos and how awful David Lee Roth's performance was.
Is there still such a huge rift between those two?
Sam and Dave, yeah, definitely.
Oh, wow.
Well, it might have been buried a little bit since, Eddie passed. At least Sammy and Eddie made up before
okay.
before Eddie passed away.
Okay, well, so we should introduce our guest. So our guest today is Justin. Justin, welcome to the show. Welcome to Reality Redemption.
Hello, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, MJ. I got to share some good jacuzzi time with my girlfriend in snow, and something about those warm, healing waters, gets the conversation flowing.
I need to get out there.
You have to go. We should do a show from Desert Hot Springs.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh, my God, that would be amazing.
Oh, my God, the jacuzzi show. The jacuzzi episode.
Justin, where are you from?
So, I guess little context. I mean, we ended up swapping a bunch of stories, and Snow said, "Hey, come on the podcast, tell a couple of them." But I guess some of the music industry stories were the ones that really piqued your interest. So, for some context, I'm approaching 40. I'm a child of the '80s and graduated high school in the year 2000. Born and raised in Los Angeles, and went to school out in West LA, Santa Monica crowd. And so, I grew up playing the piano, playing the trumpet. The trumpet was my main instrument, doing all the orchestra stuff and playing all the great, John Williams, Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park themes growing up, So I fell in love with
cool.
Music's been a part of my life forever and ever. And the other thread here was I was also very, very much into what's now ubiquitous, but back then was still kind of rare. As I grew up, I was like a computer nerd. I liked, building and fixing computers, and my dad's got millions of stories of me taking apart his VCRs and radios when I was a young child.
MJ's sons are computer nerds.
Yeah.
Good.
My dad was a computer engineer, so I had that in me too.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. No, good. They've grown up learning how the world actually works.
Right? Yeah, they are smart kids. They're really smart.
The nuts and bolts of it all. And so, by the time I got towards the end of high school, those two interests were, really kind of merging. And looking at production work and, recording engineering work felt like a really natural fit because I had this passion for music, and at some point, like every 16-year-old boy, like I picked up a guitar and wanted to be a rock star and all that stuff. But the the ability to play the music and the love for the music weren't necessarily the same. But I could do the computer stuff. You give me anything with cables and wires, and I will make it, stand up and dance. Like, and
Yeah.
so I went off to college. I left 2 years in and ended up bouncing around, spending some time in Japan, and I finally came back to the U.S. in my early 20s, not knowing really what to do, and I still had this thing hanging out, like maybe I should try my hand at recording. So I went to a recording school down here called LARW, Los Angeles Recording Workshop, and I started calling up some connections. And there's a guy who, I will not name, but my little brother's best friend's father. And I had, spent a bunch of time babysitting them. They had become fairly close family friends. And he, at the time, was a very senior attorney for the RIAA, the Recording Industry Attorneys Association, or Attorneys Association of America, I kind of forget. But they perform, they're sort of one of the tent poles of the modern music industry. Especially circa 20 or so years ago when I was talking about. And so I gave him a call and I said, hey, I'm back in town, and I'm looking for a job in the biz. Do you know anybody? Like get the nepotism working for me, right?
Right? Yeah. Hey, if it works,
I
that's
know.
how you get it.
Yeah, and I'm like, hey, you remember that time I came over to your office and fixed your printers that one time?
Yeah.
Right?
And so he, of course, he's extremely wired, and he's like, yeah, I'll make a couple calls. And 2 days later, I found myself sitting, in a senior VP's office at one of the major labels down here in Los Angeles. And there's on Colorado Boulevard in Santa Monica, there's a row of several buildings that have several of the really big major label names you'd recognize. And I got a really great gig, nice little paid internship to work at one of them. And it was a particular studio that I had a huge affiliation to begin with. Many of my favorite artists when I was a kid were recorded there. And so it was, it was the brass ring, I felt like, okay, got my foot on the pedestal, and I completed my recording engineering certification, and, started my internship over there. And very rapidly realized that the building, several floors, the top floor, of course, was all the executive suites for the C-level guys at the company. The fourth floor, the floor right underneath the top floor, was mostly the marketing department. It had the A&R department, the artist and repertoire guys. And then tucked into the corner of the fourth floor was our recording studio. The engineering booth,
Right.
the closet with all the gear. We had the vocal booth, and the recording room. And we were kind of shoved into the corner of this massive building. And I remember the first day I was there, when I was hired and they were giving me a little tour, it blew my mind how little physical space and how few staff members at the company were really involved in the actual process of making music.
What does that mean?
Well,
Like-
again, I'm sitting in this building where several hundred people are employed. I'm going up and down 2 or 3 floors every day that I never stop at. I don't know anybody who works there. And when I go in the back and I'm dealing with the actual engineers, producers, and the studio managers, I just continually was like, wait, there's only 12 people that record all of this music, and
So
that goes global, that's worldwide, that people recognize.
Right.
Like,
And-
what were the other ones doing? Like, what were the rest of them doing then?
So the other several floors were the legal department, and you know, the record industry has
How many
license.
how many floors are legal? Like how many
Well,
of them?
it was.
Or like-
I'm exaggerating. It was the entire rest of the building.
Oh wow!
Well,
Yeah, it was kind of. It was kind of like working for a major to medium-sized law firm that happened to have a recording.
That's what
studio.
I was gonna say. It kind of sounds like a law firm, not a record company.
To put it in perspective, have you been to Hollywood and seen the Capitol Records building?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an iconic building.
Okay, think of it like that.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it was a smaller building than that, but yeah, you know, same. Well, okay, I'm glad you introduced Capitol Records because this isn't the record company I worked for, but
right.
But it's sort of it's in a family of major labels that, at least at the time I was working there, were really condensed into, you know, this sort of West Los Angeles culture, right? Where between Hollywood and Santa Monica were the major headquarters of every major record label you've ever heard of.
Right.
And I guess I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit in terms of this story, but I guess this is sort of the interesting point and the really salient point to me that landed home and I still kind of harbor, right? Which is this idea that the people who run these companies all know each other. Their children all go to the same schools. They go to picnics together. They go to bar and bat mitzvahs.
I have a question really quick. I'm like, is this Scientology or the music business? I'm like, this is sounding like Scientology to me. I'm like, am I talking to Leah Remini right now?
Yeah, it's a little less structured and a little less organized than Scientology. It's not an actual religion, but
right.
My point is it is a community.
Okay.
And that, you know, that was a shock to me when I went to work there, because you see these global artists with big $1 million promotions that, you know, you see Pepsi ads and you see you know, Super Bowl ads, and they show up on toilet paper wrappings and etc. And you don't think that comes, or at least I didn't think, at least that comes from such a small group of people. And so again, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit back to sort of where I started. I was a studio intern, not yet even a recording engineer or an assistant engineer. I spent a lot of time repairing cables. You know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you were one of the hands-on guys.
So did you get to witness any big albums being produced at the time?
Yeah. Well, so that was one of the more interesting things is the very first album, like the day I was hired and they brought me on the tour of the studio, there were some big artists literally in the studio. And again, I'd like to sort of try to avoid talking about specific albums, specific artists.
Yeah.
Because, and let me be very clear, I really enjoyed the people I worked with, though I may say some negative things about the industry.
Right.
So, but they, you know, we saw a lot of people. I got the good fortune of meeting a lot of like the artists that I really loved. That was really cool. And over the time I worked there, I probably worked on almost 30 records. And I guess I sort of get to the point here, which is, you know, album after album for the producers and engineers who were doing the mixes, doing the mastering, laying down the tracks, doing the arrangements. You know, it was real easy for us to just tell, you know, like we can kind of tell who had the musical talent, who really had the fire, versus the ones who had a name or an entourage or a style, you know, and
oh wow.
And the recording industry, you know, the company I worked for, they were in the business of trying to find everybody. You know, they were trying to find you if you were talented, but they were also trying to find you if you were cool. You know,
right.
Sort of from a business model, the attitude was, well, you can't sing or play the guitar, Well, we've got like 1 million writers and studio musicians who can come fill in that gap.
Because it all makes money, and that's what they want to do is make money, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a pretty face. And...
Right.
Exactly. And then the reverse was true, right? You could also have, an extreme amount of musical talent, but you don't have a style, you don't have a presentation, you don't have an image, well, great. We have stylists, we have marketing people, we have, so.
Well, we've got you covered.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wouldn't say that they were naturally biased towards just looking for the pretty faces. But I did have several conversations while I worked there, in particular with the day manager of the studio, who had been in the industry for many, many years, since the 70s. I remember asking him one day, point blank, okay, we have one slot, we have a 2-month chunk where we can get another artist in the studio, and you have to choose now. We have a pretty face, or we have a really talented musician. Who would you put in that slot? And without blinking an eye, he goes, "Oh, the pretty face," right? Because he can control the pretty face. The pretty face shows up with a brand new spanking record deal, super excited, $50 to $100,000 in advance, that they get to spend on a credit card that has the record company's name on it. Everybody who came in that gets signed as an artist, you are so excited. You get to come into this impressive space with $1 million worth of gear, guys like myself, and even much better than myself, the actual really good experienced engineers and producers, and they're all telling you, we got your back, we liked your song, etc. So the artists always come in, whether they were good or bad, with this like high level of enthusiasm, and that was really cool. But over time, did 10 albums, did a dozen albums. Okay, we've recorded over 20. Why am I not hearing any of this stuff on the radio? Why, I know you guys, the company I work for, I know you guys are in the business of putting people into the public eye. So, and in particular, out of the, the first dozen or 20 records I worked on, there were some artists that blew my mind right out the back of my head. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable stuff. Really cool. That we all put, and that we then subsequently in the studio put a lot of work into, right? Making sure that, that vocal track is backed correctly, and that, all the compression is locked down, like all the stuff engineers do. We'd really pour it into making it sound great. And then the A&R guy and two of the executives would show up. They'd listen to our mixes. They'd go, everything sounds great, guys. Put it on the shelf.
Why?
And a lot of it, in my estimation, personally, a lot of it came down to the controllability factor, right? Will this artist show up to the PR events? Will this artist do what our corporate partners, and our clients want, right? Because again, if they only have one slot, they only have one marketing program, but they've got 10 different artists. Unfortunately, the tendency seemed to be that sort of the better songwriter you were, the better performer you were, the better the musical talent, the more you want control. Those things sort of come hand in hand. Those artists had very clear visions for their work. And so when the executives come in and the A&R guy comes in, and they say, we think this should be the single, and we think you should do a 12-city tour, and we think you should go to these 5 venues, and you need to get on this radio show. Some of the really talented artists, they come in with this, like, no, don't tell me what to do with my music. Don't tell me what this is. I'm going to tell you, right? Whereas the pretty faces,
will be like, I'll do whatever you want, whatever you tell me to do.
I also want to be very clear. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense for them because they show up and they don't have that vision. They don't have, and somebody comes over to them and says, "Oh, we'll help you out with that." I don't think it's a bad thing from the artist perspective. It makes a lot of sense.
Right.
But in the meantime, they give over complete control, right? and the record companies preferred it that way, and that I don't know. You gave me a very weird feeling while I was working in that environment, even though I kind of understood the motivations.
Mhm.
Right.
Now,
Until you get to the point where if you're an Eddie Van Halen or you're a Prince, that you can build your own studio and then you have complete control over it.
yeah, and again, I was working for this company in the early 2000s, and so we were barely past. I mean, I was trained, to cut tape and to fix the magnets in the analog recorder. So at the time, the whole studio industry was still in the process. It was at the late stage of the process, but they were still in the process of moving off of analog gear and onto digital boards. And this home recording revolution that came to us with, every college kid got a Mac that had GarageBand on it, and the slightly more advanced guys were downloading pirated copies of Ableton and Pro Tools and
Right.
and Logic. That was still a little bit off. It was still a couple years after what I'm talking about. So
What year are we talking about specifically?
this would have been. Let me think. Let me be very
Or
close.
decade, maybe.
This would have been 2001 to 2003 time period.
Okay. Right when grunge was hitting.
Yeah, and
Well, grunge
hippie-
might have been towards the
yeah,
end.
grunge had been around for a little while. Really, it was.
Right.
Yeah, really,
Yeah,
it was
that was
more.
just
It was more. It was more during the expansion of hip hop. When
Right.
rap was sort of jumping from, these huge urban followings, in populations, to jumping out to
So very mainstream.
Oh, and going international. Like teenagers in Qatar were downloading Eminem tracks. Like that was
Okay.
that's
I love
because,
Eminem, by the way.
Yeah, and there's still kind of there was still kind of a pirated people downloading MP3s on Napster and
Right. Okay.
CDs.
I
iTunes, the iPod existed and iTunes existed, but it still hadn't taken over. Still most of the way people were encountering their music, were finding their music was listening on the radio and going and buying a CD.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about really the last gasp of that particular era of the music biz.
Okay.
So back to the lawyers, though, right?
Right. Yeah, because I remember you talking to me when we had talked about this. You were talking about how they really make their money, and it has more to do with the lawyer side of it.
Yeah, and so for example, the downloading and what they used to call pirating music, right, was sort of a big topic of discussion in the studio while I was working there. And again, I was a computer nerd, so I've been burning CDs and downloading MP3s off of IRC chat windows for years before even Napster existed. So I felt weird, I'm saying here I am, the guy who is the perfect age and definitely the culprit of
You're like, should I get the hell out of here, guys?
No, exactly. You get the feeling, right?
Do I need to call a lawyer?
Yeah, and I'm sitting in this room, and frankly, pretty much everybody I encountered in that company, certainly the people who worked in the studio itself, a lot of the artists and repertory guys, and a lot of people, they worked for a music company for a reason. Everybody loved music, right?
Yeah.
And so there was this weird disconnect where I wasn't the only person in that building who was downloading MP3s while working for a major label.
Right.
It's a very, very strange. But and there was the other side of the conversation, which is how dare people steal our product. Came from a very focused set of people at that company, namely the execs and the lawyers. Right. And this was also at the time, I don't know how clear anybody's memory is about this, but the RIAA, the Record Industry Attorneys Association, they were mounting an offensive. They were funding television ads, telling that were aimed at teenagers, you wouldn't steal your neighbor's car, so why would you steal their album?
Yeah.
these type of.
But and then the thing that I find the most ironic is these assholes, this whole legal department thinks that, well, I guess it does too. I mean, I guess they are right, but it's they think that this talent belongs to them. But I guess in a way it does belong to them. Like they own this.
Right.
And it's like, but this isn't even yours. And you're like, you're mad at other people stealing it, but you're exploiting these people for money.
Well,
And back to the why they prefer the pretty face. You know, they like it was much
exactly more control.
Yep.
Yeah, but this is where the music industry screwed up. Is when Napster was coming up, that they should have embraced the technology at the time, rather than with file sharing, and Apple should have maybe jumped on the earlier.
Yeah. Well, let me drop this bomb about what the lawyers in that building were actually doing, because I think this, to me, explain when all of this was going down, I could kind of see how like it's just not possible for the majors to get behind this very simple idea of, rather than charging $16 for a CD that has 16 tracks, why don't you just charge $1 per song and create a digital backend that people can access and pay you $1 and download a song?
Yeah.
Simple idea, and that's exactly what Apple did, right? A company from outside the industry came in,
exactly.
and said, well, we're not scared of sending a bunch of lawyers over to the record companies and hammering out a complex, licensing deal. We'll do that. We have to do that anyway. But we also have all these engineers that can create a software product that can make this happen. Then the recording engineers, the recording labels, it's not like they were sitting on a whole talented staff of programmers, so that this idea that they should be the ones to do that, you can kind of tell, you kind of sense that from the inside looking out, they were also the last people who were ever going to do that. Because, and this is, the point I've been trying to get to, is the way at the time that this major label, and I believe pretty much all of the major labels, really made their money. Like what was their largest stream of revenue? And album sales was not a very big item on that list. It was certainly a big item, but clearly, especially with our artists that went, gold and platinum and multi-platinum.
Yeah. And
they made a lot of money off it.
This is at the time, because maybe some people younger out there, is that if you sold 1 million copies,
you got a gold record,
a platinum record,
or a platinum record.
500,000 was gold, 1 million is platinum, and so it was a big deal to have a platinum album. Now, if you reach gold, that's a huge deal on an album. So how things have changed over the last 20 years.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
And the other thing to think about is you think about, like, for example, a group that is a one-hit wonder, right? A group that maybe isn't the most musically impressive band, but they wrote one really good song.
Dexy's Midnight Runners. Come on, Eileen. Let's go with it.
You want to do a whole podcast with me about one-hit wonders?
Yes,
no,
we
can
should.
do that. We will do that.
Oh my God, you gave us another idea. Yes.
but those artists, if you think about it, like, why would the record company really care to spend money to market or go out to venues and rent space, create, all of the big support and backing that they can do? Why would they do that for a one-hit wonder band when they know the album's not going to sell? So the answer is performance and venue licensing deals. So the best example of this thing is called the ASCAP license, ASCAP. I kind of forget what specifically it stands for. But the rub, right? The fix was, if you own a venue, if you own a bar, a restaurant, literally any private space that serves the public to come in, right? And you happen to also play music, right? You're in violation of a licensing agreement. You don't have, as a restaurant, the right to perform that music for customers unless you pay the record companies. Now, as an individual,
I just wanted to interrupt you really quick. So
Sure.
If a bar owns a jukebox in there, do they or not? Or no, they're not.
But by modern standards, probably there are a lot of very complex deals, so probably not. There may be something on the back end where, for example, the jukebox company that they bought it from, that company may have license agreements that pass rights on to the purchasers of the jukebox. So but the point is there is always a license required,
Oh.
And part of back in that day when you bought a CD, you pay $16 to buy the album, but really also a tiny amount of that money was going towards you. What you were also doing was you were buying the right to listen to that album.
So if you were a bar that just had, let's say you had your own speaker set up and a CD player, and then you had brought in your like CDs that you had bought and played them,
then your personal collection.
Then would you be in trouble or no?
Yes, you would, because the minute you're performing it for public, the minute you're performing it for the public in a way that inures to your benefit, right? Because you're running a bar.
Because
right?
you're making money.
Right, you're making money off of the fact that you're running a bar, and having music there enhances your ability to make money as a bar. And guess what? The record company's going to come after a piece of that money.
That's crazy.
So basically these lawyers of floors
just sit and wait. Do they just go to bars?
Correct.
So these lawyers would hire people to go out to bars to see if there was a violation of licensing agreements.
Exactly.
So they can sue them.
And that's why there were several floors worth of these people.
Holy shit.
It is Scientology. It fucking is Scientology.
Well, it's similar in that it was about boots on the ground. How many attorneys can we get to how many venues, right? And then they would strong arm those venues. Where what they would do is they'd kind of come in like the fucking old mafia and say, hey, this is a nice bar you got here.
Like, do you want to keep it? Are you interested in keeping it?
Right, how much protection money are you willing to pay to keep this thing going? And they would do things like they would sit there and not only would they send their attorneys to bars, those attorneys would go to the bar day after day after day, and they would sit there and count. They would just go, he's playing this song, he's playing this song, he's playing this song,
Holy shit.
he's playing this song.
God.
Right, and so when they came and delivered the notice, it was itemized, and it was like, you're going to pay us a license for this song, you're going to pay us a license for this song, you're going to pay us a license for this song. And so what they did was they consolidated all of that into, like I said, there are a couple different versions of this, but a performance rights license, right? So instead of having to pay per song or per album, that bar could pay a flat rate and get an ASCAP license. And the ASCAP license.
That's what those jukeboxes are then.
Yeah, right. So they come in and they basically say, look, we could come after you for every single song you played in this space. Or, you can just pay us a de minimis, amount compared to what we could come after you for. And then for that, we'll give you this license. And ASCAP license, I don't want to... I may be making a mistake here because music licensing is quite complicated, so I might be confusing two different public performance licenses. But basically, the ASCAP license was a multi-label affair where Sony, BMG, Interscope, all these different big major labels, they all created the ASCAP together, and so it didn't matter if that lawyer heard a bunch of Sony songs, right? But that lawyer happened to work for Interscope, right? The first thing they do is they would go to the RIAA. And the RIAA, because they're the record industry attorneys, right? They represented all of them, right? And so these public performance licenses were created exterior to the labels themselves. It was created by an industry association. And so, if you're a venue owner, you're sitting there going, crap, I could have 13 record labels coming after me for every single one of the songs I played that they own. Or I can just pay this licensing thing and make this whole problem go away.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, that's what I'm like. You're sitting here talking, and I'm like, it's like this giant association. And then I'm like, they're like all in bed together. Now I finally understand. Like, one of my favorite bands is a band called Against Me. They're like a punk rock band. And they have a band called, or they have a song called Unprotected Sex with Multiple Partners. And it's about the music industry. And I'm like, this song makes even more fucking sense to me now.
Well, a lot of the music, a lot of the music managers and stuff like that back in the 50s were tied to the mobs. So it all makes sense now.
So it's just, it's always been there.
Yeah, it's always been
So
there.
when,
Yeah.
No, and you picked up on it immediately when I compare it to a protection racket. Like that's the model. Like that they weren't looking at the best practices of, the food service industry when they created this idea. They were looking
right.
They were looking at how to strong arm people, however they can.
Wow.
And then you go back to this idea of, again, I worked on, many albums, one of which eventually got radio play and some notoriety. And it was far from the best artists we recorded. So it's like, what were they doing with all that music, right? They were putting it on a shelf. Well, how do they make money? They paid me, they paid my boss, they paid, a lot of money goes into the production of records, especially at high level. And why would they make that investment to then just take that music and put it on a shelf? Right? The answer is, if they do that to enough music, right? Now they control the venues. So if they go to, I'll pick a town, Austin, Texas, right, and they sign 2/3 of the good artists that are playing all the clubs, playing all the bars, right, and they know their buddy at the other major label is going and signing out the remaining third, right, and the whole game is shoving all of these venue owners towards forcing them to sign performance license agreements, right? Then it becomes this game of it's the record industry isn't about finding talented artists, recording them really well, putting a marketing program behind them, and getting it out to the public to sell records. That's not the business, right? That is the business that provided cover for this other business, which is in Austin, Texas. Anytime anybody plays music, period, live performance, recorded performance, whether it's coming over a PA system because somebody's singing into a microphone, or if it's coming over your crappy speakers through your CD player and you're playing your own personal CDs. If it's being done in public in a commercial space, they would go after it. And so, of course, they want as many artists on their shelves as they possibly can. Not because they ever intended to promote their music, but because it helps them lock down the venues. It helps them.
And the artist feels like, hey, I signed this record deal. Hey, I've got it made now.
Right.
And then when you actually do make the record company charges the artist for the production, and that's why you have to tour to pay back the record company.
Oh, more than that. Nowadays, they do these things called 360 deals, where the next record that artist creates, if they go out and perform that music live, or some band 15 years after they sign this deal creates a song that gets played in every bar in the country, those lawyers are going to that bar and demanding money for the performance of that song. Artist has nothing to do with it.
How shitty. The artist is like, I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into my art, and like they're like, we don't care. You really have nothing to fucking do with this.
Yeah, I mean that takes like the movie A Star Is Born, where it looks all like glamorous and you get signed and everything's, you're now on private jets, and it's not like that. And
that's why he peed his pants. He was drinking and peed his pants.
And then when you finally do tour, then Ticketmaster fucks you on the other end.
God.
Oh, guys, it gets
so
deeper.
Sleazy.
It gets deeper. So all of that.
I thought this was the worst.
No, just to add insult to injury, all of that time, like I said, the company made an investment to create that music. They paid me, They paid the studio musician, they paid this excellent bass player to come down and lay down some tracks, for a couple of the songs of the album. They paid my studio manager. Dude's got 45 years of experience in the industry, and worked with artists like Bruce Springsteen and Quincy Jones, right? So they bring all of us in to create this music, and then they shelve the music, right? Well, the other thing they also do is they're keeping a running tab of all of that money they spent, and they charge the artist back.
What?
So when an artist, and again, this is 20 years ago, it may have changed. I really hope it has, but when the artists would bring their producer in and all of their book of songs or whatever it is, and they would sit and record, the clock was running. The minute they walked into the studio, just like the taxi, they turned the meter on. And every lunch we expensed and had come into the studio, every cup of Starbucks, and certainly every minute that they were in a booth and some piece of equipment was recording, right, was on a meter, and that meter was put against what the company eventually owed the artist. And so one of the things you'll hear in the art, especially in music business, is don't take the advance, or if you take an advance, don't spend it, because they would calculate that. They would say, oh, Mr. Artist, you're amazing. I'd like to sign you. I'm going to give you X amount of millions of dollars for your first 3 albums. And against that, I'm going to give you $250,000 advance. Right? And this artist goes, holy crap, a major label is going to record and distribute my album, and they're giving me $250,000 in cash? I'm going to go buy a car. I'm going to go, but then once the album's finished, cut, and is going to distribution, the label would come right back to them and say, you owe us $250,000 in recording expenses.
So crazy, because I always wondered why, when an artist dies and then a year or two later, it'll be like, oh, here's the last recorded track, but they recorded it long ago and it had just sat on a shelf forever. They always make it seem like, oh, we found this in the basement of their family home.
The vault is what they call it.
And the vault, exactly. There you go. That was what I was looking for. And it's like, oh, now we're going to share it with you all. No, fuck you. You fuck these people. No wonder Kurt Cobain committed suicide. I mean, really, he probably got fucked over. And it was and he had other problems too, but it's Jesus.
I think almost any major artist, if you read their biographies, you will see instances of how they got fucked over at some point in their career.
There's so much abuse. That is abuse. That is abusing people.
Well, at least now.
And I would go one further and say it's abusing, in my opinion, some of the best of us, the artists, the people who are putting their emotions and good creative energy into making stuff that we'll all hopefully buy.
That's exactly what I meant. I meant it's abusing these artists who are typically artists are tortured creatures anyways. I mean, that's why they have such brilliant stuff to put out to all of us. It's my God. Do they?
Yeah, and they prime them. Like I said, there wasn't a single artist I ever worked with, especially the ones who was their first time, working in a major studio. We're so stoked. We're just so excited.
I'm finally able to get my art out to the masses. And that's what they believed.
They're so vulnerable.
So the A&R desk, and for your listeners, A&R stands for Artist Repertoire, and the job of A&R within most major record labels is to sort through the giant catalog of music on an artist-by-artist basis and find the singles. Find it's track number 4 on this album that we can go, shop around to the major radio station at the time, the major radio stations and stuff. So the artist and repertoire guys were sort of the taste makers inside the label. And so, the amount of times that I'd be, we work late night, the recording sessions were always later in the day. I've never met a single musician that's ready to record at 8:30 in the morning.
Right.
So we would work sometimes literally overnight, and we would be leaving the studio at the same times that all the people at normal jobs were coming in to work. And I remember on multiple occasions I'd spend these overnight sessions where we're either doing some really cool recording, we're working with studio musicians, they're playing amazing stuff, we're working with the songwriter, and they're finally, maybe they're singing and they're in the vocal booth and they finally nail that vocal line in a really emotional way. And we, all the studio guys, we'd all come out like stoked, just jazzed, and then, but again, the A&R desk was right next to the studio. They were listening the whole time, and I'd walk out and I'd be like, hey, how amazing was that session last night? And they literally just look at me and go, yeah, too bad they're never going to sell any albums.
Wow.
All that work for nothing.
Can you think of it?
And I don't want to talk too much shade about the A&R guys, because that was literally their job. They loved music too, and most of my relationships with those guys is they kind of felt heartbroken by it, right? They weren't happy that they had to shelve all this music, but that was the game, and I'm, like I said, 2 decades disconnected from it, but every indication I seem to see is that it is still kind of the game. And all of these plays on YouTube and Spotify and all the streaming services, yes, there are licensing rights associated with the plays of those music, and there's money changing hands between the platforms and the record companies, but it's still the public performance licenses that it seems to me, again, I'm disconnected from it, but it seems like that driving people towards controlling the money in the venues, still kind of the game. Now,
Yeah.
COVID and the pandemic, I'm sure, has affected all of it. So, I just want to
Tremendously.
make sure.
Snow?
I was just going to say that, I think that people should have taken a little more. I think that Britney Spears was trying to tell us something, folks. I mean, and I know it's going to sound like a funny and everything, but when I listen to all this, that was like probably the thing that because I'm not a fan of Britney Spears music. Like, I like one of her songs. I like that one, "You Better Work, Bitch," because I think it's a good motivational song when you're working out. But anyway, so I saw the humanity in her the day that she shaved her head like she did. But now that the story I just heard, she probably fucking did it to say, you know what? Fuck you guys. I'm sick of all your goddamn control and all that. Fuck you. And she's known as a pretty girl. She was like, gonna fucking ruin this shit right here. Fuck you guys. I love her even more than I did before, when I was like, you know what? I saw a human in her. Like, because they marketed her as like this, like, this is what American girls are supposed to be, pop princess kind of thing. This is what you're supposed to look up to.
That's a very nice description. I don't know how PG or G-rated or R-rated your podcast is, but I would say...
it's X-rated.
Well,
okay, no.
Say what you want.
In that case, let's not beat around the bush. They marketed her as a 12-year-old girl that fuck.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
Look at the first video. Hit me one more time.
Look at the
Come
first
on.
video.
I know.
Look at the album cover for her first major album. Like they...
That just sounds so gross, though, when you say it. A 12-year-old girl that could fuck.
But
Like,
it was.
They sexualized an underage girl,
Oh,
and then pumped that imagery into every mainstream advertising channel they possibly could.
I feel dirty now for watching that video.
Well,
and then
okay,
liking it.
please tell me you didn't spank it
No.
to the video.
But whether MJ or myself or any other red-blooded American male did, I guarantee you there were ones out there that did.
Yeah.
And I can equally guarantee you the cynical, baby boomer generation executives that ran the company did that very much on purpose. Like, they don't fuck around. Like,
Wow.
they get down to what sells and how do we put it in people's faces. and they found this young girl who had been on the Disney Channel, had a good enough voice, a very pretty face and body, and they put her in. Again, they pumped her images into every channel they possibly could. This might be a good time for me to tell my Britney Spears story that I told you.
Oh yeah, you should. By all means.
Nice segue. So the same guy who got me the internship, this family friend who worked at the RAA, we had gone on. This is now many years before I ever worked. Got the job from worked at the major labels. We were just family friends, and my family went on a ski trip, and it was like a joint, like 2 or 3 families went along. We rented a little house in Utah, and we went out to go ski. And I was sitting, again, I knew this family mostly because it was my younger brother's best friend was the son in that family. And so over the years, when, they were 11, 12, 13, and I was 15, 16, 17, I would babysit occasionally. I'd go over to the house and I'd take care of them. And so, we know them pretty well, and we'd gone on this, like, joint family ski trip. They also had a daughter who was in between ages, wasn't as young as my brother and the friend, not quite as old as me. Little West LA princess, I don't want to talk too badly about her. She's probably a wonderful person these days. But at the time when I was a shit-eating, I listened to heavy metal when I was 16. When I was 16, 17, my favorite bands were Tool and Rage Against the Machine. And,
Yes, that's the good music, though.
So,
Both of us are fans.
And pre-Columbine, at least, I was even the guy who walked around school with a black trench coat and some so not a good look, but a little sentimental.
It didn't catch on. Yeah, let's just say.
And so that was the teenager she was talking to. We were hanging out in the car on this ski trip. The parents were in the market or something. They were doing some shopping. We were just hanging out in this rented car that wait for them to return. And she looks at me and she's like, "Hey, Justin, do you want to listen to the next biggest thing in music?" And me being very interested in music, also knowing that I don't share her taste, but I'm just like, yeah, put it on, right? And she pulls out a copy of Britney Spears' first album. This is probably a year before anybody in the world had ever heard of this. I certainly had it. She was not on MTV. I don't know. I don't pay attention to the Disney Channel.
And it was Oh Baby Baby, that one?
Yeah, exactly.
You did that pretty good.
And she put the album in, and she played "Hit Me Baby One More Time," and I cringed externally and internally.
As all of us did when we saw it. Okay.
Until you saw the video.
Right. When we heard it.
No, she handed me the album, and it was the album. Like the thing that you went and bought a year later that everybody went to the record store and bought. It was the liner notes were complete. The imagery had been photographed, and it was a complete album. It was just a year before they put it into the world. And this guy's daughter, she plays the song for me, and I'm like, okay, I get it. It's a pop hit. It's not my thing. In fact, I kind of hate it. But how do you know that this is going to be the next big thing? And she ran it down for me. Again, this is not even her attorney father who actually works in the industry. This is
a 12-year-old?
Yeah, 13, 14, I forget her age. This is, the 12 to 14-year-old girl who's just in the house listening to her dad's phone calls, and she broke it down. She was like, "Oh, because this album's gonna drop sometime next year, and when it does, it's gonna be on the prime rotation on these 5 radio stations. It's going to be on MTV, and there are already 3 videos in the pipeline that are currently in the process of being filmed and edited and polished. She's going to get Pepsi sponsorship. She's going to perform at the Super Bowl. She's going to, and she just ran the whole thing out.
Which all happened.
Yep, exactly.
Oh yeah, it's all planned.
I watched in horror as the next 4 or 5 years. Literally everything she told to me in the backseat of a fucking rented car, several years prior, played out like a fairy tale. Just played out, and she was right. Within years, all these little girls walking around were singing, "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time."
Well,
Oops, I did it again.
and
And it was kind of terrifying. Like, like honestly, like it was like really like.
well, that was one thing. Like back in the 70s and 80s when I grew up, I don't know where it switched, that the record companies chose what the radio stations would listen to. But back at that time, the record companies would go to the radio station and they would bribe the DJs to play the songs. Now, back in the day, DJs had more freedom, before they had, program directors and everything like that. The DJs would actually pick out what they wanted to listen to. And somehow it changed. So a record would hit in, say, Detroit and then get into heavy rotation. And then people would pick up on it and it would spread. But now it was the record companies going in and being like, this is what you're going to play. And then you got program directors and you're going to be playing these same 12 songs. We're going to play them once every 2 hours.
That's so true, because I swear to God, sometimes when I listen to a radio station, I'm like, is this motherfucking thing on a loop? Because I'm hearing the same song. I'm like, I just heard this yesterday at this time. I'm like, what the fuck?
But that's because the lawyers did research and they figured out, well, the average commute is 45 minutes. Okay, so if we play that song every hour and a half, there's your 45 minutes. So you're playing the hit song every 40, you know what I'm saying?
Crazy.
Yeah, and again, my perspective, and it's likely changed quite a bit since I worked in the industry. But at the time, the end goal there was not to sell albums, right? That hit them with it every 45 minutes. Make sure they hear it once every time they're in their car. Make sure they hear it when they're in the grocery store or having dinner at a restaurant. That whole thing was pointed at creating targets for their lawyers, right? That's the game wasn't let's promote these people and shove them down to people's throats so that those people go out and buy albums. That was nice and that happened, but effectively, I kind of think, my impression when working with these guys is that entire thing of recording music and selling albums was a marketing cost. It was a way for them to get the music out there, make people aware of it, which eventually trickled into all the public performance spaces would play it, right? And then they would go attack them.
Yeah, y'all, I've said it before and I'll say it again. And I'm going to watch the movie later because we live in the Truman Show. We really do. I'm like, the more that I learn about different things that go on in our life or different industries, I'm like, we live in the fucking Truman Show. We do. We really, really do.
I will say, let me plug one YouTube video. I have nothing to do with it, but I really like it. It captures this whole discussion of mine very, very clearly. There's a video of Left Eye from TLC.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, so they did, when they released the song Waterfalls, right? Don't go chasing waterfalls, right?
Stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to.
Their biggest hit by a long shot. They'd already released several albums and toured. When they went on a tour to promote the album that had Waterfalls on it, that sort of followed up that major success. And at the end of the tour, they owed the record company $30,000. And there's a video. It's only 2 minutes long. I really encourage you guys and any of your listeners, Google it up, find it on YouTube. It's Left Eye from TLC talking about how a major international selling recording artist, having just completed the most successful tour of their life, end up owing $30,000. Not made zero money, owed $30,000 at the end.
Wow.
Right.
We'll definitely look it up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Look it up. Watch the video.
The other thing is, if you remember the video for Waterfalls, big production, everything like that, the artist gets charged for all that production. It's not the record company footing the bill for that.
What the hell? Why? Why isn't that in their contract? Why do they not have better agents to be like, no, the artist isn't fucking paying for
I would
that.
imagine that the agents are embedded with the record companies. Maybe.
We live in the fucking Truman Show. We live in the Truman Show, people.
MJ, you're correct, but it's a little more insidious than that. It's not like, look, some agents are very powerful. And they're actually very good at identifying talent and doing all of X, Y, and Z. But it's like, where does the money come from, right? There's one flow of revenue that everybody was attached to, right? The artists made their money from it. The agents took a cut of the artist money, and it all flowed from the major label, right? And so even if they weren't directly in bed with each other, even if like the record company executives aren't going to the agents and saying, hey, let's cut a backroom deal here, it's still kind of ended up working that way, because if all of the revenue flows through the majors, then eventually all of the artists start just doing what the majors want, and all of the agents and representatives naturally select for the type of artists that they can go inject into the system, right? And so even if it wasn't a direct, shady, corrupt, backroom handshake deal, the effect still occurred. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
So they didn't even have to do that. It sort of just happened that way. And I think about those albums that are still sitting on the shelf. When I think about,
right? How many of them are there?
The vast majority of all music ever recorded.
Now, people say now, like with rock is dead, and there's no good artists out there. I imagine there's hundreds of great artists out there that we're never gonna hear. All that great music.
I have a request. Can y'all open up the vaults? Can y'all?
Hey, on that note, back when Napster started, and I didn't use Napster, but I used one of the other file trading sites, and you would get a leaked copy of an album before it hit. Like I remember Korn put out an album, and I had it like 2 weeks before the release date. That's somebody in a position similar to yours that leaks that, right? I'm not saying you, but...
No, but totally. That's why I was trying to... I went out of my way to try to describe how... this was the system. Like the individuals involved here, the overwhelming majority of people I work with in the industry really loved music and really wanted people to hear the music, they were just... working for this machine that had this other effect.
No.
So it wouldn't at all surprise me that there are, thousands of engineers out there who are sitting on, some master recordings of some unbelievable music that the world is just never going to hear.
And the more that I think about, I sit here and think about things like MJ had brought up earlier about the whole thing with DJs. Artists are talking about this because the Tom Petty song, it's called The Last DJ.
That's exactly what he was talking about.
And he's like, there goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says what he wants to say. I'm like, this is what he fucking meant, dude.
Yes.
I'm like, but there's got to be so much more other music that is like screaming out about this. In an artistic fashion that we all love, but
Right. Well, now it's easier for the artists to put out the music themselves, but the problem being is if you get it like on, say, Apple, you get paid very minusculely every time it's downloaded, every time it's played. The artist is not making.
But we know.
Much.
Okay, so we know why there isn't all the angst over. Remember how we had. It might have been a couple episodes back where I was like, where's all our angry music about how awful our times are right now? Where is all of it? Because there was a lot of it during W. Where is all of our angry music that we need to console ourselves?
Oh, the government's holding it back from us.
No. It's not just, it might be that a little bit, but it's not just that, but it's like, now that COVID came, none of these people can go to work, so they're not pissed off at their fucking record labels to write music about all the things that they're pissed off about.
Well, yeah, the record label, because now you're not having concerts, so the venues aren't making money. The artist isn't making money because they can't tour. I mean, I wonder how the music industry comes back from this, and God, they'll have to become even more evil.
Right. So my whole discussion of the major revenue stream for the company, certainly when I worked there, was certainly not album sales or ticket sales at the concert. It was money they generated by, forcing venues into public performance licenses.
Lawsuits.
So that's their target, number one revenue source was not you and I who are buying albums, but were the bars and restaurants
and those are being hit like hell right now.
Right, and their revenue streams are gone now. And so there is and again, I don't work in the industry anymore. Sadly, I no longer really have friends who work in the industry, so I don't really have a sense internally at the majors, what they're really doing to stem the bleeding.
Well, all those lawyers, they got to be cooking something up.
I know.
Or there's a lot of out-of-work lawyers.
For a long time. They've had a lot of time to think.
Yeah, and then they also, the other thing that goes on, because, I did listen to one episode of your podcast, and that you guys like to chop it up about politics. The other thing they do a hell of a lot of is lobbying. They're up in the regulatory. So this whole scheme of, I compare it to a protection racket of, hey, you like that song you just played? Well, now you owe us money. That's legally enshrined and protected. That there are quite a few aspects of the way patent and copyright law are applied to music that are a direct result, not of anybody who listens and likes music wants it that way, right?
Right. Well, they have to make things legal in order for them to do the things that they want to do. I mean, so that's why they're lobbyists, right?
Yeah, and they were very, very clever. It's like if you can't be found in violation of the law and get in trouble if you're in the ear of the person who wrote the law, right? So,
right.
It's really, really deep. It is a massively powerful structure.
Now we know why you're such a huge fan of Alex Jones. Maybe he's right.
Well, look, man, I'm not gonna lie. There is I describe it all benignly, like, hey, I just think he's entertained me. But I'm gonna lie if I said there haven't been a couple things he said where I'm like, you know what, he actually kind of hit the nail on the head that week. But let me not go any farther down that particular.
Right. Let's not any of us go down that road.
Yeah. No, but it's hard not to. It's hard. So I mean, maybe to put a button on this story, there was one artist who came in. We had been working with her for 3 or 4 months. She's one of the most talented singers I've ever encountered in my life. She wrote all of her stuff. She had a serious hand in the production of it. She had ideas for how she wanted the texture of the track to, how she wanted it to swell and fade. I mean, she really had these completed ideas of what her song should be. And, for the producers and engineers, especially the staff engineers at the studio, not somebody who was on her team, for us, that was the dream, because a lot of artists would come in, record their vocal track, and leave, and come in 2 weeks later expecting to have a song, because that was, we were over there mixing and mastering and making a song, and that was, beyond writing the words and coming up with the melody, that's all they had, and we were there to turn that into a song, right, a track, and it's great. That was not a problem. That's what we're there to do, right? But when the artists did come in, who were real clear and real driven, like, that was beautiful for us, because that was like, oh, we can really work with this person. We can toss 30 ideas at the wall, and they can come back and say no to the first 25, but that last chunk of 5, run those back again. I like some of those ideas, And so the depth of the conversation was always better. The end result was almost always reflected that, right? So worked on this amazing. She was what you might call nowadays alt pop artist. She was really a singer-songwriter, piano, guitar, and her voice type of artist, but she wanted a much more lush, modern presentation. So we juiced it up. We added, a lot of interesting sonics. I'm really, really proud of that album, and it was probably the best thing I did there. And we had completed all the recording, and we were working on the mix. And the way we worked at that studio was the artist producer would have a mix. The head engineer, so the studio manager, would have his mix, and then our manager, this is my boss, was the studio manager. He was really cool, so he would also let us, the interns and the assistant engineers, we'd also get to hang out in the studio and do our own mix, which is, again, it's this amazing thing when you're an engineer and a record producer, where you have these artists who poured their talent into creating the basic building blocks of music, and now you get to go take those bricks and build a house. Like that was the joy. So amazing session. It's like 3:30 in the morning, and the studio I worked at had a little balcony out outside. Everybody was scoring back then, and so it's like 3:30 in the morning. We're done with the job. All of us are like, not only are we professionally exhausted because we poured a lot of work into it, been a long day, but we were also kind of emotionally exhausted because it was a beautiful piece of art, and we were like trying to make sure that our work was expressing all of the work of the artist, and so we were kind of it was late at night, we're tired, we're a little bit deep in our feelings, and I go out to the balcony, and my night manager, there was a day manager and a night manager at the studio, and the night manager I really got along with, and really hit it off, and this was towards this was literally at the end of my time there, because I was out there and I walked out to have a smoke, and there's my night manager, and he has this look of death on his, like some combination of he's been stabbed and he's angry enough to stab somebody. He had this terrible look on his face, and I was like, hey man, what's going on? And he's like, they're gonna shelve this fucking thing.
Aww.
So we had come out of, again, this very intense album that we had worked on that everybody was in love with. We all wanted this artist to be on MTV, to be in people's cars, as they drive around, and so he had been so excited that he left. That, like, when he walked out of the studio that night, he took a CD. We burned a CD, and he had it delivered by messenger to the A&R guy's house at 3 a.m, right? And like I said, everybody stayed up in the record industry back then, so that wasn't too unusual. And turns out the A&R guy was awake, listened to it, called him, said, "Amazing work. We've decided to shelve her." And so that's when I walked out on the balcony, like 5 minutes after he had that phone call.
So is she still shelved, or have we all heard of her? I mean, you don't have to say her name, but have we got to hear of her?
No, you'll never hear it, ever.
Oh my God! What?
Yeah, Owen, at this point, 20 years have gone by. She's probably gotten older and is nowhere as pretty as she used to be. That's the other thing. She's gorgeous. They could have done anything they wanted with her in terms of the imagery and the iconography and the marketing stuff.
It makes perfect sense why. These people made it, but the Chris Cornells and the Chester Benningtons and the depression that they deal with,
Cobain and the oh my God.
Yeah,
this goes way back. There are interviews with Ray Charles talking about how the single most important thing he's ever done in his career was sue his own label to get his master recordings back. Like he's not sitting there talking about when I wrote Georgia, and everybody fell in love with. No, like the most important thing to him that he ever did was get his master's done.
Yeah, Billy Joel had a similar story. Bruce Springsteen after Born on the Run and Before Darkness on the Edge of Town came on, he had a problem with his record label.
Prince. Prince is the most famous for having a
He had
to change himself to a symbol. Those motherfuckers. I love Prince. Prince was a badass motherfucker. Rest in peace, Prince.
Oh yeah, and let me tell you, as a guitar player, underrated guitar player.
Oh yeah,
that's what everyone says. They're always like, he was. Nobody realizes how fucking amazing that guy was.
One of my favorite guitar solos, and the first one that I couldn't read music, but I tried to emulate on the guitar solo for Purple Rain at the end.
Oh yeah,
I love Prince. I've always loved Prince. Oh,
I think he's the type of guy that like kind of guitar players know that he was that good, but I think the general music listening public at large, if you don't play, a stringed instrument, like they go, oh, he's Prince is Prince. He was an amazing musician. They kind of just, but like I love Prince because he's one of my guitar gods. Like the guy,
sweet.
The guy was doing things on that instrument that I don't think anybody else was doing at the time. So, but I left that and it was that conversation where my night manager broke the whole thing down for me. He was like, "Look," the better part of my conversation with you guys today, he told me that night. He basically was like, "Look, this whole industry is controlled by about 25 people. They all know each other. Their kids are friends with one another. They go to each other's weddings and house parties, and they run this racket, and so I had a tough summer in general that year, and but when I left, so I literally at the end of that conversation kind of was like, I guess I can't go on this industry.
Hey,
I was heartbroken.
On the opposite end of that, though, was there anybody that was recording that was just absolutely horrible, but you were able to do studio magic on it and it turned into something?
Oh yeah, you want me to blow up somebody's spot? I'll name a name here.
Okay.
There's a hip hop producer named Silk the Shocker. Who,
I heard of him. Okay.
Yeah, everybody's heard of him. He was also a rapper too. He had a couple of popular tracks, in the late '90s, and man, when he would come in to record, he would bring an entourage of like 40 people, and he'd walk in and he'd boss all of us around. He'd tell us what to do. Maybe if we were lucky, he'd get in the booth for 20 minutes and actually record the shit he was trying to, supposed to be there to record, and it was always real bad. And then he would leave, and he was a good example of one of these artists. He would leave. My job whenever he was in the studio was to sit in the back of the room and roll blunts all night.
Oh my god!
Nice.
And I'm sitting there. I'm a paid studio intern at one of the.
You're getting paid to roll
labels.
joints.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting in the back of the room, I'm like, at any point, guys, do you need me to touch the faders on the console and make your shit sound better? Nope, that's not what I was there for. And so,
That's
totally
hilarious.
Totally blow up his spot, but he didn't do any of that fucking and on the flip side, let me leave you with a couple positive stories. I mean, you guys talk about the vault. My God, I got to go in, and I more than that, they gave me a basket and said, take whatever you want. And so there are some definite perks of there. Is that I say nobody will hear this music. That's not true. Employees of the record labels who've been given permission by the executives to go into the vault.
And so so these people could go in and just take what you wanted. You could take the master recordings.
Not the master recordings, but they had all the printed albums.
Okay.
So they had CDs essentially. CD
okay.
So
okay.
did you take that girl's album that?
I did. I still have a big, one of those old black CD binder things that we all used to carry around in our cars.
Hey, would you be able to somehow share that with us so we could hear what that was?
I really want to hear what her music sounded like.
No promises.
No,
It's also in my storage unit sitting under.
Oh, okay.
It's been a long time. But yeah, no, and you guys clearly picked up on it. I mean, it's not like for every amazing famous artist that has been recorded and distributed by one of these labels, there are 30 that were as good or better that we'll just never hear.
So sad.
It's kind of a tragedy, especially because most of them are young people and they're artists who believe they've been given the opportunity of a lifetime, when in fact what has happened to them is they've had their future stolen. And it's a sad thing. It's gotten a lot better. Look, I'm the biggest advocate possible of if you're a young person and you're writing songs, you're making music, put that shit on YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, that's print your own flyers. Get it out on whatever.
Well, that's how Arnell from Journey. That's how he got discovered. He's just on YouTube covering Journey songs, and there's Neil Sean happens to pull it up, and now you take this kid from the Philippines that can't speak English, and now he's the lead singer of Journey.
Yeah, you know
journey. Yes.
one of my favorite.
Don't stop believing.
I loved when Psy blew up with Gangnam Style because
I like him, dude. I fucking love that song. I don't know about it.
he was definitely the product of a label company, right? He was not an independent artist, but the way his shit blew up internationally and became relevant in the United States, in Western Europe, you know, in these places
Whoop,
that
Gangnam
don't speak
Style.
Korean, right? You know, like, and we just loved him because that track made us feel good. It made us feel silly and have some fun.
It's
Snow.
happy music that
Snow.
you can like dance to.
Snow.
It reminded me of what the American music companies used to be.
Wait.
They've always been a mob like racket.
I'm reprimanding Snow though. You can't sing it, okay? Because the record companies will come and sue us.
Are you guys gonna
yeah.
sue me? Like, why am I not allowed to sing in my awful fucking voice? It sounds nothing like it. Anyways.
Well, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, the whole discussion is still playing out, you know, when it comes to like what the algorithm will or will not accept and what things will or will not get hit with the DMCA, takedown notification, and you know, it's like all of this stuff is the modern manifestation of the racket I described, being exposed to years ago.
You know, speaking of Prince, I went to go see Aaron Lewis, singer Stained, but he tours now as a solo country artist. But he did a version of Purple Rain, it countrified. And Prince's estate made me take the video down from YouTube.
Oh my God!
And they actually took down my YouTube channel. And I wrote an email, and Prince's sister emailed me back, and she said, "If you just take that video down and promise not to put it back up, we will let you have your YouTube channel back." And they did.
Oh wow!
Yeah, cool. Well, look, at least that channel of communication is available. You know, like it's maybe not the perfect system, and I think there's tons of false positives and false negatives happening all the time. But you can reach out. You can slide into somebody's DMs and say, "Hey, look, I've got my little podcast over here. I'm just trying to entertain a crowd. I want to get this music in front of people, and please don't, come after me." And the possible response is the one you got, right? That's a wonderful story,
right?
As opposed to the era of the industry that I'm describing, where good luck, get sued, or pay for public performance lists. Those were your only options.
Wow.
You didn't get to talk to anybody. You didn't get to. You're gonna do write a letter to Sony.
Yeah. Well, I'm thoroughly depressed now. I think I have to go listen to some music.
Oh, so can I leave you with a track? So I talked about Left Eye video on YouTube where she talks.
Oh, yeah.
Really check that out. But then my favorite song, favorite single song that encapsulates all this frustration and rage is my favorite band of all time is Tool, the metal band.
Right.
Well, I don't even think they call them. They're these weird prog geniuses, right?
They're
We're from Arizona.
Yeah.
Maynard.
What's her face? Maynard. He has a vineyard in Jerome, Arizona. He makes wine.
Oh yeah. So that's actually the business I'm in these days, in the wine business, and the fact that this lead singer from my favorite band is also in the business.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
But so they wrote an album called Lateralis, and when they delivered the album to the label for review, so the album that had preceded Lateralis was Anima. It was their biggest commercial success, and it was heavy. I mean, really loud, distorted guitars. Maynard coming in with the nastiest metal screams, possible. Yeah, like really getting in there. And the label, I think there were probably many people at the label who knew how good the music was, but the executives were like, yeah, this aggressive stuff is selling, right? So the more mohawks, the more steel-toed boots, and the more screaming, that's what sells the albums, guys, right? So when they brought Lateralis in, which there was something like a 7-year gap, so they had been working on Lateralis for years, right? And they brought the album, and it was this musical masterpiece, right? Engineering masterpiece. The production work on that album is something I drool over to this day. And And the note from the record company was, "Great guys, but we were hoping for at least one or two really aggressive tracks."
Oh my god.
Right, because they had sort of strayed more into the prog rock and progressive metal, and they were doing things using multiple tempos and polyrhythms, and the complexity of the music was way higher than what had been on earlier albums, and consequently a little bit less of the strictly super hard charging driven distorted guitar sound, which is funny because there's still plenty of that. Most of the album is heavy, but so the executive, and I know his name, I won't name it. If people are curious, they can look up this story. There's much more information about it elsewhere. But basically, the executive said, "I'm not going to." They literally held the album. They said, "We won't market and distribute this unless you give me a much heavier track." And so there is a track on Lateralis called "Ticks and Leeches," and if you listen to that song, and I highly encourage, now if you know this story, go listen to that song and maybe look up on YouTube, look up a lyric video so you can really get the words of what he's saying. And he without naming this guy's name, they wrote a heavy song. They wrote a really aggressive, very angry song, and it is about him.
No.
We gotta look it up.
Oh, okay.
After the show, we're gonna look it up. That's the first thing we're gonna do.
And Tool's lyrics are very complex. Maynard is a poet, and there is most of their songs are these ones that have, like, you can interpret them 15 different ways. This one, if you know that it is about a specific record, it's not about the record industry. It's not about it's this one guy said, "I won't distribute your album unless you give me a heavier track," and so they went back and they wrote the heaviest track on the album, and they pointed it right at his face.
Oh,
and,
good for Maynard.
So it's called Ticks and Leeches, and I really recommend, if this discussion has made you, angry and frustrated at all, go listen to that track. It'll be very cathartic for you.
Yeah, because they're bloodsuckers.
Hey, since you're a Tool fan, why does Maynard? He doesn't like the spotlight. Like in his concerts, he kind of just hangs back, especially in a perfect circle. He has the band in the forefront. He stands in the background.
I've read that it's stage fright related, but honestly, my interpretation as a serious, Tool head and real fan of their music, but also the record engineering part of my brain, part of me that listens to the mix and how the song is mastered and how the sounds are panned around. And, the other thing that's really common in not all, but pretty much every Tool song is that his voice sits back in the mix. So it's not just his stage presence. It's when you listen to a Tool record, the drums seem to have more presence. The guitars seem to have more presence. And that's not because they're turning the volume up on the guitars and drums. What they're doing is they're turning the volume on his voice down. And they're setting, and more than just volume, they're sort of panning him over here, or they're panning him over here. They'll add some megaphone effect or some echo, or and what they're doing in the production work with Maynard's voice on most of those records is they're actually intentionally burying his voice they're burying him in the sound, as opposed to most lead singers and most lead vocals are put right on top. Right, you have all the music the band is making, and then they record the vocal and they put that sort of on top, kind of turn the volume up a little bit, because vocals and the singer are what most people respond to. Is what most people really react to and pick up in music. And so traditional recording engineering would say you want to make that voice clear and present and powerful in the mix. But when you listen to Tool records, it's very much not the case. I mean, Maynard's got a powerful voice. So I'm not trying to say the vocals aren't powerful in their music, but if you listen to the loudness of his voice compared to, say, the loudness of the kick drum, I've
never noticed that before. It's kind of like the bass from Metallica, from Injustice for All, is just like buried in the mix.
Right, and so my interpretation is that follows through into their stage performance. That by performing at the back of the stage, you can instead of just staring at the singer the whole time, you can see what Danny Carey's doing with the drums. You can see what Justin Chancer's doing. You know, you can like it's just like they do it on the albums by turning his voice down a little. I think by performing at the back of the stage, it creates more space for the band to be the sort of the front and center presentation.
See, I thought Maynard was just a kook.
They were being revolutionists.
Yeah.
Like they were being revolutionary. Like we're gonna change it. We're gonna put the band as the focus, not the lead singer.
You know, I've seen almost everybody live, but I've never seen Tool.
Me neither.
Well, you were mentioning concerts that you went to last year. When Tool came to LA last year, that was the last major show I saw, and I had actually bought tickets to go see them again in San Francisco, but then they canceled their show.
Yeah, they were supposed to come to Vegas, but in late spring, but got canceled.
So I've seen them. That would have been the fourth time I've seen them, and I've seen them during like all of their eras. You know, I saw them at a punk rock club on Hollywood Boulevard when no one knew about them, and I saw them on their major major arena tour, right? They're playing, they're selling out the Staples Center, and man, they're better now than they've ever been. Like those guys are, you know, they're just the most impressive.
They're also perfectionists. I mean, how long did it take to put out that last album? That was what, 12 years or something like that.
Oh yeah, and it's musically complex. I'm glad they gave me some time. It took me about 10 years to actually figure out the album before that. It took me several years to figure out so I like that they give me years and years to absorb their music, because I'm still a fan. I still go back and listen to the stuff they were putting out in 94 and 96, and I'm like, man, I've heard this song a million times. I didn't know, you know, I absorbed some lyric that I didn't absorb before, or I hear something that's happening on the drums, or I'm like, man, I've heard this song hundreds of times. I didn't even know that was happening. You know. So anyway, okay. I can gush about them for hours.
Yeah. Well, hey, Justin, we got to wrap this up because my little recorder here runs on battery. So
we
I'm about
would
to
love to still talk about all this. It's
you emailed me. You're like, it'll take about a half hour. I was like,
I know.
Clearly, you haven't talked to me enough yet.
Yeah, right. We've blown way past that.
No. If you've got more stories, we'll have you on again. And we got to do the one-hit wonders.
I know. We definitely want to do one on that. I'm a real fan.
Because I'm a fan of some one-hit wonders, but I know like the deep tracks on it. I'm like, why didn't this song get played?
I know. Why didn't this song make it?
Like, this is the best song on the album.
Oh, well, that means you're a true music fan. The vast majority of people I know who like music, they like the singles, which is fine. It moves them. It makes them feel good emotions, so they love it. But, you know, the true music fans are the ones who listen to the whole album and then listen to it again and then compare it to the album that came before, and they know who the bass player is. You know, they can tell you who produced the album and what the other projects those guys were. So
okay.
You know, that's the nerdy stuff. You guys want to get into that with me?
We can do that. Okay, Justin. Well, this was great having you on, and we'll definitely do it again.
Yeah, it was good to talk to you again, and tell Kimberly I said hi.
Absolutely, and you know, hello to all your listeners, and thanks for putting up with my rant.
Hey,
it was great. It was fascinating. Yeah. Mind blown.
Yep.
And don't hate the music industry too much, because they still give us the good stuff occasionally.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm thoroughly depressed. I got to go listen to some music.
Ticks and Leeches by Tool, and just remember, it's about a music company too.
Okay, we're gonna go put that on now.
All right.
I have to shut this thing off though, so we don't get sued.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I apologize. All right, guys.
All right.
Thank you very much.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, bye.